All right, so we probably should hit record like a half hour ago because we've now been talking for 30 minutes. But the the conversation today and for the past few weeks has been how delivery is skewed to older demographics and really why that's happening, what brands can do about it, and how they should change their focus and think about tracking ad performance or creative performance when you can't just track it inside of Ads Manager.
100%. This is kind of a theory that I'm trying to track down right now and prove out. Obviously, we're about to launch a study with House to kind of figure out if this, is this a line of thinking that makes sense. But some of it is, and we've talked about this briefly last week, is like on almost every account, every large account with decent amount of spend, looking at year over year delivery, it's skewing. Delivery meaning impressions, or sorry, reach, sometimes impressions, mostly going towards like an increase year over year to an older demo. Meaning maybe last year it was 25 to 45. This year, the amount of the frequency that we're getting from that like 25 to 45 audience is much lower, and the frequency we're getting on the like older demo is much higher. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is this looming question of like, all right, why is direct and organic search down? So there's this correlation I'm seeing on these brands of like, okay, we have a delivery skew over here that's like everybody's skewing to this older demo. CPMs are raising like crazy because everyone's like unintentionally kind of bidding on this older demo. But then on the flip side, okay, why do all of our MTA reads look really strong? Our MMM looks really strong, but we're down on this like organic and direct traffic. Like what's happening there, right? Like why are we missing this gap? Or or is the revenue just showing up over here in the MTA and it's still happening, it's just not getting attributed? I don't know. But like one of the theories I have is, and this is looking at accounts that year over year, the delivery to the younger demo, so you know 18 to 35, has actually decreased, and delivery to the older demo has increased with no shifts in creative, no shifts in targeting, no shifts. It's just year over year, business as usual. That's where our campaigns are delivering to. And this isn't just on like one account. This is like, I could probably name four large accounts that have seen a similar shift. So I'm asking the community, like, all right, is this connected to a signal issue? Meaning, we know that, at least according to Meta, that Gen Z, that younger demo, is what we're calling a zero-click audience. And because they're not necessarily clicking ads at the same rate as that older demo, and the way that their shopping behaviors are different, is our advertising skewing to that older demo as it should, because that's who's clicking, that's who's buying, and that's who Meta's optimizing for, because that's where the signal's coming from. Well, then on that zero click audience, we're not getting as many impressions as we typically would if they were clicking, because Meta's not indexing that audience at as high of a rate. So is that where the gap in the organic and search traffic is? Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. It makes total sense. And I guess for everybody listening, it's not as if the universal Shopify revenue is down in demographics 25 and younger. That's not what we're saying. We're saying the revenue is the same, but the spend on Meta is skewing towards older demographics because the theory is that they're operating on a somewhat outdated attribution model. Despite their best efforts trying to keep up, when you're tracking clicks, and there's a zero click audience for people, especially Gen Zs, like under the age of 18, that's really what's happening. There's no click. We're tracking clicks. So Meta stops spending where there's no click.
Exactly. Yeah. And on a macro level, is the delivery on Meta just continuing to skew to the audience that's clicking? And then, as a result, increase the CPMs are increasing on those higher, more profitable demos. I think there's two things at play too. I think that's one factor, but then also like I think just in general, that's the cohort that has a higher income, more, discretionary capital ready to spend. Like I think that's at play too. So it's kind of further fueling that machine to target that audience. So yeah, that's just a theory, but like, how do we test it out? Something we're looking at is implementing value rules and then running a house study with value rules over the course of about a month and kind of seeing like, all right, is there a correlation between direct and organic search? Because historically, like on some of the brands I've scaled over the years, like that had been the core strategy, especially when they're indexing for that younger demo, is core strategy meaning make sure that your balance between Google spend and Meta is at a ratio that you know is working together. It's those two channels aren't independent. Some brands are very independent and there's not a lot of correlation, but like other, even more like single product skew kind of gift related younger Gen Z products, seen a high correlation between Facebook spend and then, obviously Google organic search, branded, PMAX, shopping, that kind of factor. But so yeah, if you remove that, even just that awareness piece to that younger demo, because your impression share year over year or your impressions year over year on Meta is it's down, like are you going to see that gap basically happening on the Google side is something we're looking at.
And the gap is in missing revenue on certain age demos, and then as a result, Google just allocates less spend to those demos.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Less traffic, less searches coming from the younger demo that would have normally gotten, maybe let's say last year, maybe they would have gotten like 5 impressions, in a week. Maybe this year they only got 1 or 2 because
Right.
the impression was served to, and so naturally they're going to be less influenced to go search and pick up the brand elsewhere.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are going to have this question then, where is the data? Obviously, there's some privacy concerns. It all started with iOS 14. Everybody's going cookieless. And now there's modeled attribution that's helping try to fill the gap in some of these areas. You work with a bunch of data partners. And I know for anybody that operates organically on Instagram, I can pull up my analytics and I know like generally what some of the metrics are. It's not purchase and click metrics, but how are you tracking this now? Where do brands go? Are there data partners they should turn to? Are there different KPIs they should be measuring?
Yeah, I think for sure, using an MTA, Northbeam is what we prefer. It's like what I consider the best just because it can be effective for brands of all sizes, but especially effective for enterprise level brands, sorting that data, modeling it, figuring out kind of where the highest value is coming from in regards to your marketing stack. They're rolling out deterministic views, which I think is going to help bridge a lot of these gaps because basically what that is Northbeam's getting not just click data from platforms now, but actually getting impression data, and they're going to be able to model out and help answer some of these questions regarding that impression data. Now, will they be able to serve that data back to Meta? Like maybe, and it'll make the whole soup better, so to say. There's not a lot of ways to prove it out right now. One thing just in general though that we've done to prove out some of our tactics has been using Northbeam's Metric Explorer. So basically, we launched a new customer event, strategy on one brand earlier this year. It's a large brand. You don't want to just come in and start running custom events and go all in on it. So we started with about 5% of the account spend to this custom event. And then we created just correlations reports through the metrics explorer that was basically correlating any of the traffic that came through this new customer event campaign, and then its correlation to bottom of funnel visits, bottom of funnel transactions, bottom of funnel, activities. And what was interesting is at 5%, there was zero correlation, very little correlation. Bumped it up to 10, 15. Correlation started to rise a little bit. But once we got that account spend to 20 or 30, the correlation shot through the roof. It was, strong positive correlation to those bottom of funnel visits that essentially, what was happening is the new customer came in, was driving those new visits, and they're not necessarily converting on that first click, but because it's a net new click, it's a net new visit, they're converting downstream, and we're tracking them through those bottom of funnel visits, and we're able to correlate that back to where that new customer campaign was. So that gave us a lot more confidence to like raise the budget on those new customer event campaigns significantly. And then it was just a matter of finding the balance between like, all right, you have one piece of your account that's going in a sense prospecting net new visit that you might operate at a little lower ROAS on those because they're it's optimizing to a much tighter goal, which is net new people. But downstream, you're making up that ROAS because you're adding new people to your business, to your funnel, so to say. You're adding net new people to the overall ecosystem of the business.
So I want to tie that point in. That's really important. I want to tie this into some of our previous conversations because the reason this is so important is when you're only tracking clicks on Meta and you're focused on ROAS, you're always going to be looking at the lowest hanging fruit, which is your retargeting, which means eventually your retargeting pool will shrink because you're going after the same amount of people and you're focused less on prospecting. This metric in Northbeam is helping you see the percentage of revenue that's coming from new customers, despite your inability to track it on Meta. So you might have a campaign that's running exclusively to target non-users, which is not always easy to do. And it might not show revenue immediately because they're still clicking on the last ad from the retargeting campaign, even though they first discovered your brand from this introductory brand awareness campaign. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, theoretically, that's exactly it. I think on the meta side, like there's ways to look at a breakdown of where that delivery is happening, but to truly optimize for just those net new audiences without just trying to target them specifically, like there's just so much leakage when you try to do that, and you go broad or you go lookalikes, and then by suppressing, like there's so much leakage that happens. So the new customer event has been a game changer for us. I know a lot of brands use it. Some brands just haven't had success with it. It's funny, I talked to a number of people that are like, what made it work for you versus other brands? And I think the biggest takeaway is just giving it time. And like any event, it has to get data. If it's optimizing against your standard purchase event that has millions of dollars of spend against it, and you throw in this new customer event that you only give it a chance at, like, under 10K in spend, like, of course it's not going to look as good as your standard event. So you really have to give it time to spend. I mean, it's different for every brand, but like I think that's the biggest factor. But yeah, just to your point, it's like buying that, buying that net new traffic at the end of the day is really what we want.
Do you think
That
there's a
that
difference
impression that's
in
not aware of us.
right?
Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, sorry, I cut you off. Yeah, the idea is you got to get in front of people that don't know you yet. Otherwise, you're just sort of spinning your tires in the same loop. Do you think that there's a benefit of being a larger brand, or I guess a benefit probably of being a smaller brand when you're focused on just net new reach, and then this becomes more of an issue as you start to scale because you can get stuck in your own little silo of customers?
Yeah, I think it becomes a much bigger issue as you scale. We have a brand we started working with a couple months ago. Things are going really well. We scaled the ad spend 40% this month because things were going well. And sure enough, what we've noticed, in their fractional CMO flag is like, oh, hey, like we're performance is great, but by the way, our AMR is actually declining, and we're less, our acquisition side is actually not as strong. It isn't performing as strong, and that's a no-brainer. Just as we've added spend, the first people that Meta is going after in that expansion is the people that are already in its ecosystem for that brand, so, or in its audiences for that brand, which is previous customers. So yeah, as you scale, that's definitely something that becomes a bigger and bigger problem.
This might be a sort of left field question, but it's something that I'm curious about. For some of the larger brands that I worked with in the past, what we would consider larger is like 10 million ARR, right? So call it a million a month. Even for actually, you know what, I'm going to go even lower. The brands that are in that seven figure range, like sub 10 million, do you think that the performance of their ad campaigns has a lot to do with the performance of their posts organically? And then you're picking up some of that retargeting traffic. And does that deplete as you get bigger because you have so many impressions on so many channels? You don't really notice the side effects of one video going viral unless it goes mega viral.
Yeah, I think that the bigger that they get, the more convoluted the data pool gets. So I definitely think that's the case. Like, especially smaller brands, organic social is really important. Less from the like reach organically and more from just like, hey, if their organic socials good, generally it just means they're good at making content and they can make good ads that are gonna also do well.
Yeah, they're
And I
correlated
think,
now. They're not so disconnected.
yeah. So like I'm thinking of a brand right now as we talk about it, much larger, multiple nine-figure brand. They have a television network, right? Like actual old school shopping television network. So a lot of their site traffic comes from not TV as in like, oh, television ads, but no, just their natural awareness of being on prime time, having your own television network.
Sure.
So we go to run ads for this brand and like and they want net new customers. And one of the problems is like it's impossible for Meta to go find those people because it's so convoluted with, you know, hundreds of thousands of visits that are just coming organically from their natural, reach through their television network. So even when we put extreme suppression on and we do all this like optimization and custom events and stuff to get that first time ROAS to a place that's within target is nearly impossible because it's so that pixel's so convoluted with data from their their organic traffic. And this is something we're trying to work out right now. Like, how do we do it? Because I've seen that before as well with big YouTube channels that like they launch. We worked with one. It was one of the fastest growing YouTube channels. Like, crush it with content. They have a ton of organic reach. Scaled the business really, really fast. Like, exceptional operator, super smart. Like, awesome, awesome opportunity to work on. But like one of the problems, even with Northbeam, was like, wait a minute, like your data is so convoluted because you already have this grandiose awareness, based on your YouTube channel, and this engine is just driving all this traffic and conversions to your site. Like Meta doesn't know which way's up or down. It doesn't know how to go after those net new people because it's flooded with this traffic that is already going to buy. It's non-incremental. They already are aware of you on YouTube. It's yeah, it's a really kind of hard thing to solve because it's all, in my opinion, it's all signal related. It has to do
So,
with, okay, how do we suppress the signal enough to get it just the right kind of data to tell it to go after these people that are incremental versus these people that would have bought anyways and already are aware of the brand.
yeah, yeah, it's a unique problem. You have so much data, you need to figure out what data to exclude. But I hope that there are a few big brands that are either listening to this or reading it, because this is the easiest way to tell if you're working with a junior media buyer, where they launch on a larger brand a low spend campaign and they're not using an MTA and they're not delineating between returning customers and new customers, and they're focused on ROAS. Because what's going to happen for a brand that has a TV network, they have billions of impressions, literally, and
Mhm.
you launch $1,000 a day campaign. Well, you're going to get a 9.2 ROAS. It's going to look unbelievable, and they're going to claim themselves
Yeah.
as the hero. But the reality is, it's such a minor portion of their spend. It's not even scraping the surface on acquiring new customers. And that's the importance of, being able to work with a large budget, actually scale a campaign, and show concretely the percentage of new customers versus returning customer. Like we were talking, I can't remember if this was on or off camera a couple weeks ago, where you had a brand go from 4% new customer acquisition to 6.5% new customer acquisition. And it's a massive brand. And that is actually a very large difference. They increased their new customer acquisition rate by, what would that be, 50%, 30, 33%, but a lot.
Mhm.
And unless you understand the data, you won't be able to grow. You won't be able to find new customers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, going back to the media buyer side of it is like on that large, well, yeah, the media buyer side is it, so much of it too is depends on the size of the brand. Because sometimes like a very small brand, like even though we know realistically it's not a 9 ROAS, like we've all seen those marketing bros post their results and try to
Yeah.
get clients, and they're like, look at this 9x, and it's like, no, that's not 9 ROAS. But like directionally, that's a really good signal. Like Meta's liking that. Like, all right, let's figure out like was that sales incremental, and how much spend, and what was the audience, the suppression, and maybe there's ways where you look at that and you lean into it and you're like, okay, this is really good. But like so much of that has to do with the life cycle stage of the brand itself, like how much organic? How old is the brand? What's firing? So like the television network, for instance, is like we'll launch campaigns for a product that maybe has an AOV of like $50. And we'll do like a 7-day click, 1-day view. One also like no, brands like that never run view optimization. It will literally like just it's not so we're always on 1-day click, but let's say hypothetically we were on a 7-day click, 1-day view, which is like most novice advertisers in that setting. Now I'm not saying 7-day click, 1-day view is bad. I'm just saying in that context a novice advertiser might select that and you see a CPA of like $1, and it's like, oh, it's $1 to scale, and so you dump a bunch of budget into it. But I
And then
think
you find that the ROAS doesn't stick. Yeah,
yeah, and
it's a
then you look on the back end and do a data export on the actual sales of that product and correlating to the spend, and it doesn't net out. So yeah, I guess the question then is how do you limit Facebook in a way that gets it enough data, also gets it going in the right direction? And I think that's the ongoing question is like Meta doesn't want you to limit it at all. It just says, give us everything, give us shop, come blast the data. Don't use custom events. Like we've been pushed and by some of our reps, for the last 6 months, like to not even like almost a year of like, don't use these custom events, use standard purchase event. But there's like a 40% leakage on the standard purchase event with the exclusion audiences that we're sending in there. It's not going after new people, so I guess that's the big question, and I know everybody's asking it right now, and has been of like, all right, how do we continue to get Meta going into this net, creating net new reach? So
and I'm sure Meta has this problem too. They recognize it. They just don't want to admit it because right now, or whether they do or don't, the fact of the matter remains you're spending an additional 40% of your total budget acquiring customers that were going to buy anyways.
yeah, exactly, and that compounding over time, it doesn't result or end well for a lot of these D2C brands that have, they're spending, you know, exorbitant amount of money on Facebook. And that's the question then. All right, how much is too much? Are we hitting that audience capacity? And it's like there's all these mixed views on it where like, you know, I looked at a few brands that spent $20 million on Meta last year and they relatively hit the same amount of people. And they're all targeted towards the same demo. And it's like, okay, if we spend double that, are we going to reach, you know, double the people? No, because I've also seen that chart too. It's like, no, like double that spend hasn't reached, even triple that spend hasn't reached that many more people.
Just ups the frequency in a way.
Yeah, yeah, it ups the frequency, and maybe you do need that higher frequency on some of those brands because that product is, has a high repeat purchase rate, but because that customer is coming back, like there's a certain point you need to figure out, like, all right, how much do we need to advertise to them until they're, to protect them from going to a competitor versus coming back. Like there's all these
Right. And you're
questions,
playing
and
defense almost.
yeah, exactly. But then it's like, well, we're just looking at performance marketing like we would traditional linear TV for a fortune brand at that point. It's like I think we've talked about this. Like, Coca-Cola isn't necessarily advertising to go acquire new customers. They're advertising to defend market share. And at a certain point, that's what you're doing on a larger brand as well.
It's interesting that you think you might reach this kind of scale plateau at the $20 million spend because if you just think about the raw numbers, $20 million on a $10 CPM is 200 million people, and there's 380 something million people in the U.S. But how many of them are your market? Right, maybe 20 million of them. So you're going to go in it at a frequency of 10. That could
Mhm.
be totally great if you have a high repeat customer rate, if it's a consumable product, or if you have, an appropriate CPA. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting problem to try to solve, and I think that's the importance of not looking at ROAS on a campaign level month to month and looking at these month reports. You need to be looking at your percentage of new customer share that you're acquiring, and really be looking at your MER over a 12-month duration.
Yeah. And I think especially on the larger accounts, that just has to be the standard and it has to be more planned. as you were saying that, I was just thinking of like when iOS 14 came out, a number of years ago, how that like it made advertisers actually have to be advertisers, because it was like for a minute there we didn't have visibility on what the ads were actually doing. It was like it's insane. But it realized like we had to start developing these ways of like analyzing if the traffic's actually having an impact, and looking at the core components of what makes a successful ad campaign, which isn't just what the platform reports as ROAS. It's really funny because like I recently came back to a brand that I had the opportunity to scale around the pandemic to 9 figures. And then, iOS hit, a number of things hit, competition, all these things, and the brands kind of go through their life cycle. And we stepped back onto that brand recently, and I'm going back through my old playbook and all the stuff that I did back in the day to scale that brand, and applying what I know now about it. And like, there's so many things that I've gleaned since then that I'm like, I can apply, even, like we talked about novice advertising. Back then, I was like a novice advertiser, didn't have a lot of spend under my belt, and kind of trying to figure out, looking at a 7-day click, 1-day view. And then knowing what I know now, years later, I'm like, oh no, no, we're coming back on with 1-day click on this account, period. And then that's the first change. And then instantly those campaigns on that purchase event are over time outperforming, according to the MTA, like their BAU campaigns. And we're able to kind of scale back into that because we're like, all right, we're looking for people that are very gift focused, one-off purchasers. They're ready to make their purchase now. There's not a lot of conversion lag, and it's working. And yeah, I think just in general, though, that's a good reminder for any advertiser to like try to keep it fresh on the accounts that you're working on, because it's so easy to just get in a rhythm of like, oh, this works and this is how we do it. And, you know, we've been hired on brands just because they need a shakeup, like their performance is mediocre. It's okay, but like they're not pushing the limits, and they're not finding those new tactics. And that's where I think it's as a media buyer, yeah, important to always be learning and trying and testing things, and work with partners and clients that are also have that mindset that you create a safe space to go and learn. And there's a core value for like taking swings, and sometimes winning big, sometimes losing, but doing it in a very measured way.
See, that right there is why it's sometimes really difficult to continue to scale a large agency, because you have this tendency to SOP everything and bring in junior
Yeah.
media buyers that can sort of be button pushers, which is the exact opposite to what you're doing. You're training really technical, really highly skilled media buyers that have not just data abilities, but strong creative abilities, and the ability to analyze a creative asset from a technical point of view, which is not a rinse and repeatable playbook. It takes you a lot of time. I know you're bringing on a media buyer next week, and it takes a lot of time to train these people and bring them up to speed, and make sure everybody understands that every account operates differently, and you have to learn it as if it's your own brand.
100%, and that's the thing. And to bring your own creativity to the account on the tactic side, not just the like creative, and ask why, or what if, I think curiosity really is key. I think it's key to a lot of things in life. It's in college, the best professors were the ones, not that they had all the right answers. They're the ones that just asked the best questions and got you thinking for yourself, and I think in general, with advertising, with marketing, with anything, it's just coming to the table with the right questions to ask, because those questions are going to lead to new discoveries and new tactics, and ultimately new opportunities.
Yep. Well, I couldn't put it any better. Well, I'm excited. That was a great
Cool.
call. And next week, we've been putting a lot of time into a special data project that I'm very excited to more about as the weeks progress.
I'm excited to share. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for joining me. Talk to everybody next week.
See ya. Bye.